Welcome! We're excited to have you at this training, specifically designed to give you the tools that you need for success when it comes to labor organizing. During this course, we'll cover several important topics such as our position on unions, associate rights, signs of employee disengagement, and how to identify, escalate, and address associate concerns. In this section, you will learn Amazon's position on unions, why we prefer a direct working relationship, and how to discuss unions in an appropriate tone that fits Amazon's culture. At Amazon, we aspire to work hard, have fun, and make history. We respect the individual rights of our associates and have a variety of open-door mechanisms to encourage associates to bring their comments, questions, and concerns to management. This direct connection with our employees is the most effective way to understand and respond to their needs and to support the rapid innovation and operational flexibility that are keys to our success in raising the bar on customer order fulfillment. Unions pose a threat to this direct connection. This commitment to a direct connection with our associates makes union representation unnecessary. We are not anti-union, but we are not neutral either. We will boldly defend our direct relationship with associates as best for the associate, the business, and our shareholders. We do not believe unions are in the best interest of our customers, our shareholders, or most importantly, our associates. Our business model is built upon speed, innovation, and customer obsession, things that are generally not associated with unions. When we lose sight of those critical focus areas, we jeopardize everyone's job security, yours, mine, and the associates. Likewise, our culture values a robust, open dialogue between associates and managers, so we can work together as one team, continuously innovating, simplifying, and improving things for our customer. As we'll explain later in the course, a union severs the direct working relationship between associates and managers that we value so highly. While we understand unions work in some industries, they would conflict with our culture, customer obsession, and direct working relationship. In summary, it's important that we create an environment where associates feel safe sharing ideas, raising concerns, and asking questions, including questions about unions. We don't badmouth unions in general, but we will speak openly with associates about unions, including any specific concerns about particular unions involved in organizing. And we share our preference for a direct working relationship frequently and boldly, even when no organizing activity has occurred. Now let's listen to 4 managers talking to associates about unions. When you've heard all 4, choose which one most closely reflects our position on unions.
Unions? Well, I guess that's really up to you guys. I guess they're like any business. Some are good and some are bad. I think you should just do some research and figure it out for yourselves. Whatever you do, I'll respect your decision.
Unions? A bunch of thieves and crooks, if you ask me. You really think a union would work in this day and age? We have to move quickly if we want to keep our customers happy. The union, they're just a bunch of dinosaurs waiting around for someone to tell them they're extinct. All they want is money, and they don't do jack for employees. I don't know why you'd even consider them.
Unions? I guess that's ultimately up to you guys, but I don't think they would work here. Our whole business model depends on being fast and flexible to keep our customers happy. I'd rather work directly with you guys to make that happen. I would hope that's what you want too. But if you have any questions or concerns, I'll do my best to answer them, or if I don't know, to get answers for you.
Unions? We don't need to talk about that. You've got me, and if you have a problem with me, you can go to my boss. Let's just get back to work and take care of our customers.
Correct. The manager is acknowledging associates' right to choose for themselves, but is expressing our position on unions, that we would rather work directly with associates. The manager is also offering to keep an open dialogue with associates to help answer any questions they have about unions. In this section, you will learn the fundamental rights granted to non-supervisors under the National Labor Relations Act, including rights that apply in non-union settings, even when no organizing is occurring. You will learn to recognize what associate activities may be protected activity under the National Labor Relations Act. Now that you understand our position on unions, let's talk about the rights non-supervisor associates have under the federal labor law. The National Labor Relations Act is the law that governs the rights of employees to act together as a group in the workplace. It is intended to promote stability in U.S. labor relations, end labor-related violence, protect employees from discrimination because of their union-related beliefs, and establish clear procedures to determine whether employees want to join a union. One of the most basic rights the law gives employees is the right to self-organize. Employees can form their own union, with or without help from any third party. Of course, they also have the right to assist existing unions and to join existing unions. The important thing to remember is that employees have the right to decide if they wish to organize. If they do, they are free to determine how to organize and whether to involve third-party unions to represent them. Managers and supervisors are agents of the company, may not join unions, and must not interfere with employees' rights. Employees have the right to act collectively. In other words, employees are considered to have strength in numbers. They have the right to band together for mutual aid and protection. What this means is that employees have the right to compare notes, to discuss things like their wages and benefits to see how they are being treated. They have the right to take concerted action, to act together to gain the protections inherent in being part of a group rather than taking individual stands on issues. They have the right to support their coworkers. For example, supporting a coworker who is facing discipline that they feel is unfair. While management does not have to agree to employee demands, regardless of the size of the group involved, it must respect and protect the employee's rights to band together. While employees have these collective rights, some employees prefer to be treated individually, rather than as part of a group. Employees therefore have the legal right to refrain from forming or joining unions, collective bargaining, or otherwise taking concerted action. Ultimately, it is up to the employees to decide whether to participate in these activities or to refrain. The National Labor Relations Board is a federal agency with broad authority over the employees' rights covered in this module. The NLRB investigates unfair labor practice allegations, that is, alleged violations of the federal labor law, such as interfering with employee rights. Unfair labor practices can be committed by either an employee or a union. It is important to remember that unfair labor practice means something that is unlawful. Several things that workers or unions might argue are unfair in the ordinary sense of the word, such as a particular wage scale or employee layoffs, are completely lawful and therefore not unfair labor practices. We often associate employee rights with union organizing, union elections, and unionized workplaces. But employee rights apply at all times, not just when a union is trying to represent employees or has already been elected. Employee actions in non-union workplaces can be protected even when employees don't have and don't want a union. Examples would include an employee demanding an increase for all associates or complaining about a work rule that impacts his or her coworkers. It could even include associates going on strike by walking off the job. The easiest way to spot this type of protected activity is to look for anything that involves more than one person or is done on behalf of more than one person. I have an issue that impacts me is not generally protected activity. We have an issue that impacts us, or I have an issue, who else is with me, are telltale signs of potentially protected activity. Let's look at some other examples of specific activities that are and are not protected. Associates have a right to wear shirts, hats, buttons, stickers, or similar clothing promoting or opposing unions as long as it does not create a safety hazard. Similarly, associates have the right to discuss their opinions on unions in the workplace at any time. In contrast, associates do not have the right to be overly offensive. For example, using unacceptable profanity in their t-shirt slogans or speech. Employers have a right to address such issues, but must remember to focus on the offensive language, not whether the opinion favors or disfavors organizing. Certain activities can cause employees to forfeit their protection. For example, if associates were to threaten violence, that would cause otherwise protected speech to lose its legal protection. But these rights are not easily forfeited. For example, brief, fleeting profanity may not be enough to forfeit protection, even though associates do not have the right to use offensive language. In any case involving protected rights or possible forfeiture, you should contact your ER manager or ER principal for further guidance before taking any disciplinary action. Listen to each of these hourly associates' comments and answer whether the comments are likely protected under the National Labor Relations Act.
You're being totally unfair to me. I work my butt off. All you do is ride me all day. It doesn't matter how much I pick. If I'm off task for 5 lousy minutes, you're out there asking me, what's my barrier? What's keeping me from working? I know what you really mean is, what's wrong with you? You don't respect me. All you do is take, take, take.
This is not likely protected activity. Although the associate's concerns may sound familiar, she is not purporting to speak for or about a group. She's raising a personal issue. Her level of passion does not create protection.
What you did to Joe wasn't right. He worked here for 3 years. That ought to count for something. He made one screw up. I know it was TDR, and believe me, I get how serious that is. But it ain't right that you fired him after 3 years for one lousy mistake.
This is likely protected activity. While this is all about Joe's personal situation, it is not Joe that is raising the complaint, but rather one of his coworkers. Coworkers have a protected right to speak up for each other.
The Tech 3s deserve a raise. We know you gave Taylor a $1 an hour raise. She's only a Tech 2, but she makes more than me, Abel, and Glenn.
This is likely protected activity. The associate is advocating on behalf of not only herself, but other associates as well. While we might prefer associates not to discuss their compensation with each other, that's a right they have under the National Labor Relations Act. The right to band together to change terms and conditions of employment would mean little if employees could not discuss those terms and conditions openly.
You need to do something about Raji. He doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground. Because he can't plan, they had to offer VTO to 10 of us last night. We shouldn't have to drive all the way here just to be sent home.
This is likely protected activity. The associate is complaining about working conditions that affect a group of associates, in this case here, manager's performance and the VTO process. The associate's poor attitude and inaccurate claim that she is being sent home by being offered VTO are irrelevant. The complaint does not have to be accurate to be protected. The insult and profanity, while inappropriate, are not so extreme as to forfeit protection. In this section, you will learn about our no solicitation, no distribution policy, and how that impacts associate and third-party solicitation and distribution. You will also learn how to distinguish employee speech, which is always permitted, from employee solicitation, which can be restricted in accordance with our policy. While associates have a right to discuss unions at any time, they are not permitted to actually solicit for the union during working time. Soliciting for the union means trying to get a coworker to sign a card or petition for the purpose of organizing. Working time means when either the associate trying to get the card signed or an associate being asked to sign are on the clock. It does not include paid or unpaid break or lunch times, or before or after work. Of course, there are other kinds of soliciting, such as selling Avon products or Girl Scout cookies. It's important to remember that you can only enforce rules against union solicitation if you enforce the same rules against all forms of solicitation. At Amazon, we allow only limited charitable solicitation in compliance with our no solicitation and distribution policy and our charitable exception guidelines. With this limited exception, you must prohibit all other solicitation whenever it occurs. You cannot wait until an organizing campaign starts to begin enforcing the solicitation policy. Employees, including off-duty associates or associates from other buildings, have a right to distribute literature in favor of or opposed to unionization, only in non-work areas on non-working time. This would include, for example, in a lunchroom during lunch break, or in the parking lot before or after work. Note that we do not permit third parties, non-employees, to solicit or distribute on our property at any time. This rule applies to any third party and must be enforced equally against both unions and other third parties. As with solicitation, you must enforce this prohibition before any union activity occurs. Otherwise, you will not be permitted to enforce the no distribution rule when union activity begins. In this section, you will learn about the warning signs most commonly associated with early union organizing, as well as other warning signs that could indicate associate disengagement, vulnerability to organizing, or early organizing activity. While employees have the right to organize, we have a right and responsibility to share our position that a direct working relationship is better for the customer, the company, and the associate. In order to be able to do that effectively, it is critical that we recognize the early warning signs of potential organizing and escalate concerns promptly. If you see warning signs of potential organizing, notify your building HRM and GM site leader immediately. HRMs and GM site leaders should notify their assigned ER managers or ER principal immediately. The most obvious signs would include use of words associated with unions or union-led movements like living wage or steward, petitions or other concerted activity such as an associate purporting to speak on behalf of his or her coworkers when raising concerns, union graffiti, union t-shirts, hats, jackets, or other clothing, union flyers, and union visitors in or near the parking lot. Some signs are less obvious than finding the actual union flyer, but they can still indicate associate disengagement, which is itself a warning sign for potential organizing. These are signs that must be monitored very closely and should still be escalated to employee relations. Examples include associates who normally aren't connected to each other suddenly hanging out together, associates who were close suddenly stop speaking to each other, groups of associates scatter when approached by management, the grapevine, VOA board, or other feedback dries up, increased associate negativity, anger, or confrontation, unusual complaints or change in passion or detail around complaints, unusual interest in policies, benefits, employee lists, or other company information, or any other associate behavior that is out of character. For example, an associate who normally leaves promptly begins hanging out in the break room for an hour after work each day. In order to recognize warning signs, it is critical that you know what an associate's normal behavior looks like. Often, it is the change in behavior that is the warning sign, more than the actual behavior itself.
Thanks for the feedback yesterday. It was tough to hear, but at least I know what I need to work on to be a PA.
This is a perfectly innocent comment.
It really wasn't safe to drive in the snow yesterday. I'm not going to be charged UPT for being gone yesterday, am I?
The associate has a legitimate question about UPT and possible exemptions for bad weather.
Why doesn't Amazon cover grandchildren under the funeral leave policy?
He has a legitimate question about a policy.
I got off work about an hour ago.
This is a possible warning sign because the average associate would not wait so long after their shift without a reason. The reason could be that he is talking to his coworkers about a union. You would want to understand better why he is still in the break room so long after his shift ended.
I can't believe we don't get annual raises every year. It sucks to have my wages capped.
There are no signs of potential organizing, only that he has a legitimate associate concern.
I got off work about an hour ago. My car's in the shop, so I'm stuck waiting on my girlfriend to pick me up.
He has provided a reasonable explanation for why he is at work so long after his shift, so this would not be considered a possible warning sign.
Hey, thanks for the free lunch. It was nice to celebrate safety.
This is a perfectly innocent comment.
How long do I have to work before I can get nursing school paid for?
She has
How
a
long do I have to
legitimate
work before I
question
can get
about
nursing school paid
eligibility
for?
under the Amazon Career Choice Program.
It's hard to make ends meet. I don't know. You guys don't pay a living wage.
This is a possible warning sign because living wage is a concept unions push for, that every job should pay enough to support a family of 4.
Hey, I was just trying to remember Adam's last name. Could I get a copy of the site roster?
This is a possible warning sign because she is asking for something that would be of great value to a union for organizing purposes. Her request doesn't seem in line with her stated purpose of trying to figure out a single associate's name.
In this section, you will learn TIPS and 4, 2 acronyms that will help you know what you can and can't say to associates when talking about unions. You'll also learn whether these same rules apply to unions. Finally, you'll learn about the realities of collective bargaining and how bargaining can impact associates. As we've covered earlier, we're not shy about talking to associates about unions. But what should you say or not say when you see possible signs of organizing or are asked questions about unions? This section will help you understand the legal do's and don'ts, as well as how to apply them consistently with our philosophy about unions. We'll start with the don'ts, but don't worry, there are only a few things that you can't do, and you wouldn't ever consider most of them. You can remember what these don'ts are by remembering the acronym TIPS. TIPS stand for threaten, interrogate, promise, and spy. You can't threaten an associate to dissuade them from wanting a union. A classic example is, anyone who votes for the union will be fired. Interrogate means you can't ask direct questions about unions like, how do you plan to vote? Or, how many people went to the union meeting last night? Promise is the opposite of threaten. Just as you can't threaten someone for being for the union, you can't promise a reward if they reject unionizing. For example, vote for the company and we'll raise your wages. Spying involves being places you normally wouldn't be to try to find out more about the organizing. For example, going to a union meeting. For each of these, we'll look at some tips to avoid breaking any rules. While you might never think of making a threat, there will be times when you have to talk to associates about possible negatives of unionizing. For example, you would never threaten to close your building just because associates joined a union. But you might need to talk about how having a union could hurt innovation, which could hurt customer obsession, which could ultimately threaten the building's continued existence. To avoid your comments being an unlawful threat, follow these rules. Avoid absolutes. Speak in possibilities instead. Take time to create proper context. For example, explain why having a union might make us less competitive before talking about what happens to businesses that aren't competitive. Never predict the future. We never know exactly what will happen in the future. We may know what has happened in the past at our company or at other companies, but the future can never be fully predicted. To avoid interrogation, don't ask direct questions about union support or activity. Instead, ask questions we always ask to run our business, with or without organizing being involved, such as, what barriers do you have? What frustrates you? How are things going for you today? Is this a good day or a bad day? What's the latest word on the floor? Lastly, use the power of silence. People tend to fill silence and talk more to avoid uncomfortable silence. If you're speaking about a topic, like a recent union meeting, using well-placed periods of silence may lead associates to volunteer additional detail. And remember, it's almost always better to listen than to speak. To avoid unlawful promises, don't condition something we will do with a particular organizing result. Never speak in terms of, if you do this, then we'll do that. Don't commit to anything other than communication when you're discussing organizing. Our commitment is that we will share our opinion, provide the answers to associates' questions as best we can, and then let associates make their own decisions. To avoid spying, Establish routine patterns of associate engagement. For example, make it a point to regularly talk to associates in the break room. This will help protect you from accusations that you were only in the break room to spy on pro-union associates. When you do overhear conversations, you do not have to leave or tune the conversation out as long as you are attending to your business and not eavesdropping. But to avoid even the appearance of surveillance, you can go a step further and join conversations appropriately. For example, you could say, "I couldn't help hearing that you were discussing unions. I don't mean to butt in, but I'd love to share my opinion about unions with you." This helps create an environment we want: safe, transparent conversations where we can help educate associates about unions and the benefits of a direct working relationship. Also, never review video to establish associate identity when protected activity is or might be involved. For example, do not use video to determine who left an anonymous VOA board comment, as such comments may be protected speech. Use video resources only when appropriate for business purposes, such as security and loss prevention. You may be wondering if TIPS applies to unions. Generally, no, TIPS does not apply. Unions cannot make threats, but there is no rule against unions interrogating or spying. As for promises, the union can say just about anything it wants. The law says companies can't make promises because they control wages and benefits. They could make their promises come true. But unions' promises are considered to be propaganda, empty campaign talk, precisely because the union can't make its promises come true. Legally, employees are presumed to know this, but few actually do. You should feel very comfortable speaking to associates about unions, knowing that almost anything you say is lawful. Remember, as long as what you're saying doesn't violate TIPS, it's okay. But to help you understand what you should say and to help you stay closely aligned with our philosophy, we use the acronym FOR: Facts, Opinions, Rules, and Experiences. You can share facts about unions with employees. Typically, we share facts about how unions work and how unions would or would not impact associates, as opposed to talking about union corruption or other similar anti-union horror stories. One thing we will always do, however, is correct any misinformation put out by unions, even if that means we are wrongly perceived as anti-union. We will always create an environment where associates can safely ask any questions and trust us to provide truthful information in response. Opinions can be mild, like, "I'd rather work with associates directly," or strong, "The unions are lying, cheating rats." The law protects both. Opinions can be expressed mildly or strongly in terms of tone and frequency. Amazon prefers a mild opinion expressed strongly. We frequently and proudly remind associates of the values of a direct working relationship, but we avoid anti-union rhetoric. You have the right to enforce work rules. Just don't suddenly start enforcing if you haven't done so before. You can also explain labor law rules, like, bargaining is a give-and-take process. There are no guarantees. Associates may have misconceptions about how unions or the union election process would work. Just as Amazon.com wants to be the one-stop source for customers regardless of what they are seeking, we want to be the one-stop source for information.